They buried the woman who sold me like a secret. I was never meant to see this day. I stood across the street, under the shade of an old elm, collar up against the January wind, watching from behind dark glasses no one would recognize. The cemetery was quiet except for the sound of heels crunching frozen grass and the distant thud of dirt hitting a wooden box. My mother's box. The woman who gave birth to me, raised me just long enough to learn my name, then erased me. Black coats gathered like crows around the grave. My brother Eli stood by the headstone, shoulders squared in a dark suit that didn't quite fit. He was taller than I remembered. Next to him, my sister Rachel held a crumpled tissue in one hand and the hand of a little girl in the other. Her daughter, maybe. My niece, apparently. They didn't look like they were mourning. Not really. Just performing grief. No one mentioned the child who was supposed to be dead. I was the ghost at the edge of the plot. The lie they had all been told and never questioned. When I was 9, my parents told my siblings I drowned in a lake during a family camping trip. There was no lake, no camping trip, just a drive in the dark and a stranger who took me in exchange for an envelope. He didn't even open the door himself, just leaned from the porch and nodded. I watched them lower her casket and wondered if she thought about me before she died. Wondered if she ever told anyone the truth. I doubted it. The woman I remembered didn't apologize. She justified. A man in a priest's collar said something about forgiveness and release. I stepped back as the crowd began to disperse. No one saw me. No one would have known who I was, even if they had. That version of me had been buried long before today. I stayed until they were gone. Until the cold settled deep in my bones. Then I walked to the edge of the grave and looked down at the polished lid that sealed away the last chapter of a lie. "Rest well," I said quietly. "You won't haunt me anymore." Then I turned and left her in the dirt. There was no screaming, no dramatic goodbye, just a quiet knock on my bedroom door and my father's voice, low and flat. "Get dressed. We're going for a drive." It was late past midnight. I was still in pajamas, half asleep, the air heavy with the kind of silence that warned you not to ask questions. I obeyed. I always did. My house had rules. Don't open the door without asking. Don't talk about family outside of family. Don't touch the locked cabinet in the hallway. My mother said discipline built character. My father said nothing, unless it was an order. I used to think all families lived like that. Only later did I realize mine operated like a well-kept secret, clean on the outside, hollow on the inside. My siblings and I weren't close, not really. Rachel was 4 years younger, Eli 2 years older. We moved like satellites around our parents, never colliding. No sleepovers, no birthday parties, no friends over after school, and no explanations. That night, my mother handed me a packed suitcase. She didn't look at me. "You're going to stay with Uncle Cal for a while," she said, brushing invisible lint from the zipper. I didn't have an Uncle Cal. At least, not one I'd ever met. I remember the smell of the car that night, cold vinyl and a hint of cigarette smoke. I sat in the back seat with the suitcase beside me, the silence so thick it hummed. My mother didn't say goodbye. My father just drove. We pulled into a long driveway I'd never seen before, gravel crunching under the tires. A porch light flicked on. A man stepped out, big frame, gray beard, a face I couldn't place. He didn't smile, didn't speak. My father got out first, opened the trunk, handed over the suitcase. Then something passed between them, a glance. Then an envelope. I stayed in the car, waiting for someone to explain. No one did. My father opened the back door. Out. That was it. No hug. No lie to soften the blow. I stepped onto the gravel, suitcase in hand, watching as my father got back in the car and drove away without looking back. The red taillights disappeared into the dark. That was the night my childhood ended. No warning, no rescue, just a one-way handoff and a door that closed behind me. The next morning, I asked when my parents were coming back. Cal laughed, a dry, humorless sound that didn't reach his eyes. They're not, he said, flipping a pancake onto a chipped plate. You live here now. I stared at him, trying to process the words. But, my mom said, your mom said whatever she had to. He turned off the stove and poured himself coffee. No milk, no sugar. You'll get used to it. His house was small, musty, and smelled faintly of oil and old food. No photos on the walls. No TV. Just silence and the dull ticking of a wall clock that sounded too loud in the stillness. That afternoon a woman arrived. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, clipboard in hand. She and Cal spoke in low voices at the kitchen table. I sat on the couch, pretending not to listen. I need the paperwork, she said. The guardianship agreement. Cal handed over a folder. I caught a glimpse. My name, Jordan Lane, typed cleanly across the top. I didn't know what a guardianship agreement was, but I knew it didn't mean love. He signed something. She signed something else. Then came the envelope. Again. This time, fatter. She slipped it into her bag without counting. Everything's in order, she said. If anyone asks, he's your nephew from out of state. Parents killed in a car accident. He nodded, like it was just another grocery delivery. She stood, nodded at me once, then walked out without saying a word. That night, Cal gave me a new toothbrush, a new set of clothes that didn't fit, and a mattress on the floor of a room that smelled like paint thinner. Don't make noise at night, he said from the doorway. Don't touch anything that's not yours. And don't call me uncle. I'm Cal. No bedtime story. No good night. Just a door that closed and locked behind him. I was 9 years old and no longer belonged to anyone. Back in the town where I used to live, my mother sat at our kitchen table, holding back fake tears, as she told Rachel and Eli that their brother was gone. It was an accident, she said, voice trembling just enough. The lake. It happened so fast. There was no lake, but there was a funeral and empty casket, a folded flag, a photo of me from 2 birthdays ago, framed in flowers. They gave the neighbors closure. They gave my siblings a lie. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away, I was being reshaped. My name was changed to John, short for Jonathan, though Cal never called me that. To him, I was kid, or boy, or nothing at all. Within a week, I was enrolled in a public school under a new last name. Same grade, different curriculum. I sat at the back of a room full of strangers who didn't ask questions and teachers who never looked twice. When asked about my parents, I repeated the script Cal gave me. Car accident. No family. Just my uncle. At home, he gave me chores cleaning, stacking firewood, scraping the mildew off old basement walls. No allowance. No affection. Just orders. Sometimes at night, I'd stare at the ceiling and mouth my old name like a prayer. Jordan Lane. I didn't know if saying it kept it alive or made it hurt worse. Every piece of me was being scrubbed clean, school records, doctor visits. Even my hair got cut short like Cal's. My childhood photo albums were probably thrown away. My bedroom repainted. My place at the table filled in without pause. And my siblings? They moved on. Rachel was 6. Eli was 11. Old enough to grieve, too young to question. My name stopped being spoken, except in whispers. Eventually, I became a ghost. Cal never hit me, never locked me in a basement. That would have made the story easier to explain. Instead, he just erased me, kept me fed, clothed, quiet, treated me like something he'd bought second-hand, functional, but not quite new. Years passed like that. One long blur of doing what I was told, forgetting what I wasn't allowed to remember, and the worst part was knowing that somewhere out there, my life had gone on without me. A family that mourned a boy who hadn't died. A boy they never even tried to find. Mr. Wallace wasn't cruel, not in the way people like to imagine when they hear the word sold. He didn't raise his voice, didn't hit me. He didn't need to. His silence did all the work. He fed me, gave me clothes, shoes, and a room that smelled like dust and old wood. But every kindness had a price tag. I earned my keep by working. By 10, I was splitting logs with a dull axe, cleaning gutters in January, painting the siding when the humidity made your skin stick to your bones. At 13, he had me helping with his appliance repair side business. "This is how you learn," he'd say while handing me a stripped screw or a broken fuse. But learning wasn't the point. Labor was. Cheap, quiet labor that didn't talk back or charge by the hour. We never had real conversations. He gave commands. I followed them. If I asked a question, he'd either ignore me or look at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. I learned to stop trying. He made me lie. At school, I was his nephew, Jonathan Wallace, orphaned by tragedy. He coached me on the story. "Your parents died in a wreck in North Carolina. You came to live with your only living relative. You're grateful. Say it with a straight face." Every time someone called me John, it felt like wearing someone else's skin. The name fit like a shirt 2 sizes too small, but I answered to it, because survival meant staying invisible. One time, when I was 12, I asked if I could write a letter to my parents, just to say I was okay. He stared at me for a long time, his jaw tight. "They don't want to hear from you," he said finally. "You're lucky I took you in." After that, I didn't ask again. The years blurred. School, work, sleep, repeat. People saw me, teachers, neighbors, cashiers, but no one looked close enough to notice what was missing. No one asked why a kid never got visits, never had family photos, never smiled in class pictures. Mr. Wallace wasn't a monster. He was worse. He was efficient. I was 16 the first time I saw the attic door open. It was always locked, had been since I arrived. But that summer, during a heat wave, Mr. Wallace forgot to latch it. I waited until he left to run errands, then crept upstairs with a flashlight, and the kind of silence you learn when survival depends on it. The attic was a time capsule. Cardboard boxes, peeling suitcases, plastic tubs labeled with faded masking tape. I wasn't looking for anything. I just wanted to see what he kept hidden. What I found changed everything. In a dented metal file box near the back, under yellowed tax returns and old instruction manuals, I found a manila envelope. Inside was a birth certificate, mine. Jordan Lane. Not John Wallace. Not the made-up kid I'd been pretending to be. My real name. My real birthday. My real parents' names printed in bold at the top. Underneath it was a photo. Faded. Torn at the corner. My siblings and me sitting on the front porch of a house I barely remembered. I must have been 6. Eli had his arm around my shoulders. Rachel held a juice box. My mother stood behind us with a stiff smile. I stared at it for a long time, my hands trembling. Then came the letter, handwritten, folded twice. "Cal, thank you for giving us a clean break. We can't raise Jordan anymore. He's difficult, doesn't fit into the family the way the others do. This is best for everyone. You have our blessing to handle things however you see fit. Please don't contact us." No signature. Just initials C, L, and ML. My parents. I read it 3 times, like it would make more sense the next time. It never did. They hadn't lost me. They hadn't been forced. They'd planned it. Chosen it. Chosen to erase me like I was a bad dream they'd woken up from. I packed the birth certificate, the photo, and the letter back into the envelope and tucked it under a loose floorboard in my room. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew something had changed. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't just surviving. I was remembering. I left the morning I turned 17. No cake, no goodbye, just a backpack, the envelope from the attic, and 84. I'd saved doing under-the-table work for one of Mr. Sane, Wallace's clients. It wasn't enough, but it would have to be. He'd gone to a job 3 towns over. Wouldn't be back until nightfall. I waited until the house was quiet, then walked out the back door, careful not to slam the screen. The sun hadn't fully risen, and the world felt like it was holding its breath. I didn't hitchhike, didn't steal a car, just walked 8 miles into town, to the public library, where I used the free computer to search Youth Shelter, Anonymous. 2 hours later, I walked into a drop-in center and told the woman at the desk my name. My real one. Jordan Lane, I said. The first time I'd spoken it aloud in years. It sounded strange. Powerful. She didn't blink. Just handed me forms and asked if I was safe. I nodded, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. They placed me in temporary housing that night, an emergency foster home with a woman named Carol who smelled like lavender and didn't ask too many questions. She made spaghetti and told me I didn't have to talk until I was ready. I didn't talk much at all, but I ate 2 plates and slept for 12 straight hours. Within a week, a social worker named Vanessa was assigned to my case. She wore pencil skirts and big earrings, and always brought a thermos of tea that smelled like cinnamon. "I read your file," she said one day. Eyes soft. "It's incomplete, but I believe you." I handed her the envelope. She read the letter twice and said nothing for a long time. Then she asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no, not yet. Instead, we got to work. Reclaimed my birth certificate, filed paperwork to restore my legal identity, opened a bank account. By fall, I was placed in a long-term foster home. Not perfect, but safe. I stayed quiet, focused, learned to live with the space my old life used to fill. I had no plan beyond survival. But I had something I hadn't had in years. A name. The first job was bussing tables at a pizza joint off the highway. 7.5 an hour. Cash tips if you stayed late. I took every shift they'd give me. Saved every dollar. During the day, I studied for the GED. Passed it in one shot. Math was rough, but I nailed reading comprehension. My social worker brought me a cupcake when the results came in. "This is how it starts," she said. "One win at a time." I moved into my first apartment at 18. A basement unit that smelled like wet drywall and mildew, but it was mine. The key felt heavy in my pocket, like proof. A bed, a mini fridge, 1 pan, 1 fork. You learn to make it work. I didn't buy decorations. Didn't unpack much. I was still waiting for it all to disappear. But it didn't. Month after month, the rent got paid. I kept breathing, kept waking up in my own space. At night, I researched. I didn't know what I was looking for. Exactly closure. Maybe. Or a crack in the story that had buried me. I started with public records, obituaries, birth announcements, marriage licenses. I found my mother's obituary by accident, 2 paragraphs in a local paper. Cancer. Age 58. Survived by husband, 2 children. No mention of a third. I stared at the screen for hours, trying to feel something. Relief, anger, grief. But all I felt was distance. She was already gone, and I hadn't even begun. Then I looked up Eli. Then Rachel. Eli had gone into law enforcement, a sheriff's deputy in the same county we'd grown up in. He looked just like Dad. Serious, clean-cut, married, no kids. Rachel was harder to find. She'd changed her last name. A wedding photo eventually gave her away smiling beside a man in glasses, a baby bump under white lace. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could reach out, say something, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I saved everything. Screenshots, addresses, clues. I built a folder labeled Proof of Life. Not mine, theirs. I wasn't ready to be their brother again, but I needed to know they were real, that I hadn't been erased completely. It started like most nights, me, alone in front of the computer, a half-warm cup of coffee next to the keyboard, and the soft hum of my space heater fighting the winter chill. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for anymore. My searches had become ritual. Old addresses, property records, names I barely remembered. That's when I saw either name, Claire Lane, my mother, the woman who gave birth to me, and later handed me over like a defective appliance. The obituary was short, sparse, died at home, loving wife and mother, survived by her husband Charles, her son Eli, and her daughter Rachel. No mention of me. Not even a footnote. Not even preceded in death by, just erased. Again. There was a guest book, 3 condolences, one from a coworker, one from a neighbor, one from a church friend. No photos, no stories, just a woman buried in silence. I stared at it until the screen blurred. Then I took a screenshot, closed the tab, and opened Facebook. I searched Eli Lane and filtered by city. Third result, badge in his profile picture, arm around a blonde woman with a forced smile. Comments about local fundraisers and department promotions. His profile was mostly locked down, but one public post caught my eye. A throwback photo, 3 kids on a front porch. Eli, a toddler Rachel, and a gap where I should have been. Miss these simple days, he'd captioned. I moved on to Rachel. Her last name had changed, Wheeler now. Found her through an old classmate list from high school. Her profile was brighter. A kid, a husband, weekend hikes, birthday cupcakes. She looked happy. Settled. I didn't know what I wanted from them. Not revenge. Not even an apology. Just recognition. Something to prove I hadn't imagined everything. That I'd been part of the story once. So I made a burner account. No photo, no connections. Just a name. J.L. And I typed, "Do you remember a sibling named Jordan?" Clicked. Send. Then waited. 3 days passed. Nothing. I refreshed the inbox every hour. Reread the message until the words lost meaning. Checked the seen status, like it owed me something. But nothing changed. Just silence. On the 4th day, I stopped checking. On the 5th, I almost deleted the account. Then, that night tone, 13 a.m., a reply. Jordan died when I was 5. Who is this? I stared at the message so long my coffee went cold. 5 words, and the entire lie roared back to life. Jordan died. Past tense. Permanent. I typed a reply. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Nothing sounded right. How do you tell someone they've been lied to their entire life? That their family has a ghost they never mourned because the body was never real? Finally, I wrote, "He didn't die. I'm him." Then, before I could second guess it, I hit send. The seen notification popped up almost instantly. Then nothing. No reply. Just the heavy weight of digital silence, like she was staring at the message as blankly as I had hers. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Still nothing. At 2:27 a.m., I got another message. Just one word. Prove it. I closed my eyes and exhaled. That at least I could do. I didn't respond right away. I needed time. Not to think, just to breathe. I'd spent so long avoiding this moment, I hadn't prepared for what came after. Prove it. The next day I found it. Buried in an old envelope from the attic, the photo of us on the porch. Me, Eli, Rachel, juice box in her hand, my arm in a sling from when I fell off the swing set. I remembered that day like a freeze frame. We'd been laughing about something. Rachel had a gap in her teeth. Eli had a bowl cut and scuffed knees. I scanned the photo and sent it. No message. Just the image. She read it within seconds. Then nothing for nearly an hour. My stomach turned over every time the typing dots appeared and disappeared. Finally, "Where did you get this?" "It was mine. It's from the house. The sling was from when I broke my arm falling off the swings at the elementary school playground. You cried more than I did." Another pause. Then, "You remember that?" "I remember everything." After that, the messages came faster. Short at first, then longer, like peeling away rust. She told me they'd been told I drowned, that we'd gone camping near a lake and I slipped off a dock, that my body was never recovered, that there had been a memorial at church, closed casket. She remembered hugging Mom while she cried into a handkerchief. Remembered Dad saying, "God takes some souls early." I told her the truth in pieces. Not everything. Not yet. Just enough. Mr. Wallace. The name change. The letter. The attic. The years of being someone else. She stopped responding for a full day. I thought I'd lost her. Then she replied, "They lied to us. For years. I know. You must hate us." No. I just want to know who I was supposed to be. That night, she sent another message. No words. Just a photo. Her daughter. Blonde curls, missing front teeth, juice box in hand. Her name's Nora. Your niece. I sat in the dark for a long time, holding the image like a lifeline. The first time I saw Rachel in person again, she looked older and younger all at once. We met at a park in a town, halfway between hers and mine. Neutral ground. Safe distance. She stood by the bench before I got there. Arms folded. Eyes scanning every face that passed. I watched her for a minute before walking up. "Rachel," I said. She turned, looked at me, and didn't speak. Not at first. Her eyes welled, then hardened, then softened again. It was like watching someone fight 5 emotions in 5 seconds. "Jordan," she whispered. I nodded. She touched my face like she was making sure I wasn't a dream, then pulled me into a hug so tight it knocked the breath out of me. We sat for hours, talked in slow, careful circles, childhood memories, the lies, the gaps, the way grief had shaped her. She told me how Dad never really talked about it, how Mom deflected questions, how Eli just accepted it. "I believed them," she said, tears running freely. "You were gone. I didn't even question it. You were 5. It wasn't your job to know better." Later, she told Eli. Sent him the photo. Told him the story. He didn't respond right away. When he finally did, it was 3 sentences long. "This is some sick prank. Jordan's dead. Leave us alone." Rachel was crushed. I wasn't. I expected it. Still, 2 weeks later, I got a text. From Eli. "If this is real, meet me at Dad's grave next Sunday. Noon. Alone." I went. He was already there, standing like a statue, arms crossed, jaw tight. He didn't hug me, didn't smile, just stared for a long time. "You look like him," he said finally. "I am him." He didn't respond, just looked down at the headstone. "They told us you fell in, that they couldn't find you, that it was God's will." "It was their will." "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think I knew that, deep down." We didn't talk much more, but when he left, he clapped a hand on my shoulder. Not warm, but not hostile either. Progress. Reunion didn't come with balloons or healing music. It came with awkward silences and cautious glances. Some relatives didn't believe. Some didn't want to. But Rachel did. Eli. Maybe. And that was a start. The question haunted every conversation. Why? Why would 2 parents sell their child and bury him under a lie? Rachel didn't have answers. Eli didn't author not at first. But the more we talked, the more the cracks showed. It started with money. Dad had been deep in debt, credit cards, unpaid taxes, even a failed business that no one talked about. The church helped, but not out of kindness. They had rules. Expectations. And my parents were desperate to keep their standing. The church wasn't your average Sunday gathering. Not really. I remembered the name, even after all those years. Harvest Covenant Fellowship, weekly home groups, sermons about obedience, whispers about purity in the family. I used to sit through sermons where the pastor said some children were born to test their parents' faith. Looking back, I realize now I was the test. I was the restless one, the question asker, the kid who didn't sit still, who talked too much, who drew monsters in the margins of his Sunday school worksheets. Rachel told me something I'd never known. One night, I heard them arguing. Mom said she couldn't control you anymore, that you were going to ruin everything. Ruin what? Their reputation, their place in the church, everything they'd built. Later, Eli dug deeper. He went through old files, financial records, found a payoff from the church's discretionary fund, 10-0, labeled as a family emergency, the same month I disappeared. He brought it to me in an envelope. "This is blood money," he said, laying the paper down between us. They hadn't just gotten rid of me. They were paid to do it. In a church obsessed with image, I'd been a blemish, a problem to erase, and they found someone willing to take me in exchange for silence. Not everyone believed it. Some relatives refused to talk about it. Others hinted it was complicated. But the pattern was there: control, reputation, obedience. And many years old. Too loud, too curious, too much. They didn't get rid of me because I was bad. They got rid of me because I wouldn't break. For a long time, I didn't know who I was. I wasn't Jordan anymore, not really. But I never became John either. I existed in the in-between, a shadow of two names and no clear identity. But once the truth was out, something shifted. Slowly, deliberately, I started reclaiming what had been taken. I filed paperwork to restore my legal name, Jordan Lane, walked into a DMV and signed it myself. That was the first real step. The moment I saw my name on the plastic card, the one that had been buried with that fake obituary, I felt something click into place. Then I started writing. At first it was for my journal entries, fragments of memory, moments I was afraid I'd forget again. Then I realized it wasn't just my story, it was something bigger. So I kept going, wrote everything, every chapter, every detail, the attic, the letter, Mr. Wallace, the silence, the reunion, the betrayal. I reached out to a podcast that focused on untold survival stories. They read my draft and called within 24 hours. "We want to help you tell this." I didn't sugarcoat it, didn't turn it into a headline. I spoke calmly, clearly, told them I wasn't the villain my parents painted, but I wasn't a victim either, not anymore. I was a kid who was abandoned, a teenager who survived, a man who found his way back. The podcast launched with 3 episodes, then 5, then 10. I started getting messages from other people, other kids who'd been erased, repackaged, renamed. Some were adopted illegally. Some disappeared into family lies. Some were still lost. "If I don't tell the story," I said in the final episode, "they'll bury it all over again, and this time it'll stay buried." My voice didn't shake. I wasn't angry, just resolved. Telling the truth wasn't about revenge. It was about ownership. It was about writing the ending my way. And for the first time in my life, the story belonged to me. Time didn't erase what happened. It just gave it shape. 3 years passed. Rachel and I texted every week, called when we could. She sent photos Nora's first day of school, a birthday cake with way too much frosting, a note she found in an old shoebox that I'd written in crayon. "Jordan's spaceship designs do not touch." She cried when she read it. I did too. Eli took longer. But eventually, we met for lunch once a month. Quiet conversations. No digging, no apologies. Just 2 men trying to bridge a gap that had been forged in silence. One time, he handed me a box inside, was my old Star Wars toy. "Found it in Dad's attic," he said. That was it. No big moment. Just proof I hadn't imagined the boy I used to be. Some wounds never healed completely. That was okay. We weren't trying to pretend nothing happened. We were just choosing to be siblings, in spite of everything. Mr. Wallace died last winter. Cardiac arrest. Alone in a cabin outside of Knoxville. No will, no funeral. I saw it in a two-sentence blurb buried in the obituaries. No mention of a nephew. No next of kin. I didn't feel anything when I read it. Not grief. Not rage. Just quiet. He never faced justice. Never answered for what he was part of. But he also never broke me. And in the end, that was enough. The podcast took off in ways I hadn't expected. A book offer came. A documentary team reached out. I said no to both. I wasn't looking for fame. I was looking for peace. Instead, I wrote the story myself, page by page. For me, for Rachel, for Nora, for the kid I used to be, who kept whispering, "Remember me" in the dark. And now, I live quietly. Still write. Still speak. Still answer emails from strangers who say, "Your story sounds like mine." My name is Jordan Lane. I was 9 when they sold me, 17 when I escaped, 25 when I found my siblings again. I wasn't lost. I was taken. And I found myself anyway. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.